Welcome, everyone. It is 7:05, so we would like to get started. We do have a few people still coming into the room. We are joined by over 150 people this evening, which is wonderful. So we are going to honor everyone's time and get started at this point. Welcome to all of our families and everyone joining us this evening. We're grateful to spend time together. We will be recording the webinar, and we will be providing you with an email tomorrow with follow-up materials and websites and links, as well as the recording, so that you can watch it at another time. We'll also be providing you with an exit survey. Our goal is that tonight will be the first of a few evenings where we provide opportunities to families and support during this difficult time. I'm honored to be a part of this with you, along with Alison and Dane. The three of us are the LC4 Virtual School centrally assigned principals, and our role is to work with all of our students, all of our staff, and all of you to create the best possible learning environment during these unusual times. I'll turn it over to Alison.
Welcome, everyone, and good evening, families and parents. We are so excited to have you here with us this evening. I think I speak for all of the administrators in Learning Center 4, and outside of myself, Dane, and Lauren, there are still 11 other administrators, and we all feel blessed to work daily with your children. It's interesting to be an administrator in this challenging time, because not only do you have the challenges that you regularly face, whatever regular means for you, but now all the different issues with the pandemic. So we're excited to have two honored guests with us today that are going to share their knowledge. I know as a parent, I was super excited about this evening. I have 4 young people in my world, 2 of whom I met when I met my husband, and they're now 22 and 19. And our younger 2 are 12 and 9, and they're all very different during the pandemic. So there's a lot of wisdom. Before I share with you who will be speaking with us this evening, I would like to just acknowledge the land, to recognize and respect the Indigenous peoples as the traditional stewards of this land and for their enduring relationship with the land. So with no further ado, the 2 knowledge holders that I would like to bring to your attention, and I call them knowledge holders for a reason, because we're all knowledge holders. And we know that those who hold the most knowledge about your children is you, the parent. So we ask, as you listen this evening, to reflect on your own knowledge and the things you've learned, and feel free to share with each other as parent to parent all the brilliance that you've already learned throughout your journey with your young people. So we have 2 guests with us, and they can turn on their mic, their camera when they're ready. Their surprise. So first we have Dr. David Schwartzbein. Did you see that on camera? Second I said his name. And we are very excited to have David with us this evening. A little bit about David. He is a registered psychologist. He works in the areas of school and clinical psychology. He is a manager of psychological services in Learning Center 2. He is Learning Center 4. This is Learning Center 4, of course, but we're one big family. We all work together. He's also a certified medico-legal examiner, and he's been conducting psychological assessments, provided support for counseling with children, adolescents, families, and schools for over 30 years. Welcome.
Thank you. So I want to just take a couple of minutes to just introduce some things that I think are important. First of all, I'm so glad you're here, and it's so difficult. I hope you begin to appreciate what it's like for your kids. It's so difficult to have a conversation with someone who I can't see and who can't respond. And so this is just a little bit of the world that your children are living in, which is so different than what it's like to be inside a classroom. And as a parent, it's a very challenging time. Parenting is challenging at the get-go. We get these new human beings who we don't know and have to learn about them. So what I'm hoping to do is to give you a few tools tonight. When people come to me as a private psychologist, or when they call for help, they often feel inadequate because they aren't handling something and they're worried. And so what I think is they aren't inadequate, they're wise, because they know that their tools aren't solving the problem. And I'm like the Home Depot. I got lots of tools. So I think I welcome you all. I appreciate your wisdom in being here. I'm only sorry that we can't have a conversation together.
Thank you so much. And also here this evening, we have BSW and MSW Ryan Fuentes. He is a writer, he is a speaker, a community educator. He's also a social worker and an entrepreneur. Alongside his role at Taibu Community Health Center as a program coordinator, Ryan is deeply engaged in anti-racist and anti-oppression human rights advocacy, particularly in the area of anti-Black racism, through his work as diversity and inclusion consultant with Education on Trial. We welcome you here this evening, Ryan.
Good evening, everyone. It's a privilege to be with you. Thank you to my colleagues for the warm introduction. And I'm just looking forward to the conversation. I'm sending love and strength during these trying times. And I'm sort of like the backup Home Depot, as David mentioned. So I got some tools as well. And I really just want to prefix them and give some context by, really just highlighting 3 pieces. And the first piece is that what works for one child, as sort of Alison alluded to off the top, doesn't work for every child. And a lot of these things depend on their personalities. It depends on their age, their developmental stage, and that sort of thing. The second thing I'd like to highlight is that a lot of the expectations that we had before the pandemic, in this quote unquote normal world, are very different now. And so I just urge you all to kind of reimagine the expectations that you have for your children and the expectations that you have for yourself. And lastly, I would say that, I commend you all for being here. I think that your mental health and well-being is paramount to supporting the mental health and well-being of your children. So I'm glad to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ryan. As you're aware, when you registered, you had the opportunity to send a question or 2 in. And what myself, Lauren, and Dane did is we grouped them together. So the questions that we're asking, and the first one is going to David, is one of the questions that was asked by many, many families. And this question is about routines. David, what can you share with our families about strategies for organizing routine into their day?
Well, first of all, routines are really important. And especially in these days, we don't have routines that normally structure our lives. We don't wake up to go to school. We don't spend the day in school. We don't come home. All of those things, whether you're, for many of you, whether you're working or not, you're doing it at home. So you have to structure the day by yourself. And there aren't any of the things that reinforce those changes. So one of the things that's helpful to do is to recognize that and to realize that we have to create routine. And one of the important things about doing this and anything else that we're going to talk about is that's a conversation. If whatever is going is working, do more of it. If it's not working, talk about what's not working about it for you. Is the child sleeping in? Is the child not getting work done? Is the child, or you, by the way, could also feel this, just feeling stressed and frazzled. So it's good to start with a plan for a schedule. When you wake up, when you eat, when you get up, and begin your day. And then, the child's day is going to be partially structured by his classroom and his day, but it's important to take breaks. And the breaks aren't just to read a book, or you can't go outside and play with your friends. You might want a snack to re-energize, but you also may need an exercise break. And I believe Ryan's going to talk more about that, to re-energize. And there are lots of good resources for that. Then you want maybe to personalize your workspace so that it feels right to the child as a place of work and maybe not a place of play. Um, Finally, you want to help the child. I mean, isolation is a big issue. You may want to help your child connect with classmates. These are all part of our structure that have gone by the wayside. And last of all, you want to reward yourself. So if there's a problem with this, one of the tools I'm going to give you is called the gap. You got it? You got the gap? The gap is the gap between the demands of the situation and your or your child's ability to meet those demands. And as we talk further, I'm going to talk to you about strategies to help identify what is the gap, because it may be different than what you think, and how to deal with it.
Thank you so much for that, David. We have a question for you, Ryan, but as you answer, please feel free to add any other ideas that you might want to add to what David has already indicated. Our question for you, Ryan, is about sitting all day. Children are sitting all day, online school. How do we include physical activity into their daily routine?
It's a great question. And I loved David's response there initially. And I would just, echo that by saying, in terms of the part about routines, just the importance of, having that schedule and being consistent with that schedule. Obviously, routines can help you feel in control. They can reduce stress, and they can sort of just boost your overall mental health and well-being. And I love the piece around just positive reinforcements, and affirmations and check-ins, and those sort of things that are critical during these times with your children. Now, in terms of incorporating some physical activity, the first thing I would say is to validate your children. Typically, they would be part of some extracurricular activities, whether it be soccer, basketball, baseball. They would be doing science experiments. So you want to validate that this is a difficult time. The second thing I would say is the education piece. I'm big on educating children and young people around what is the importance of exercise, right? How does it, for example, it boosts your energy. It reduces stress. It can help with focus. And also, I think it's important to put your children in sort of a teaching role, and get them to share exercises that maybe they used to do in gym class, that are still possible to do at home, to try to, I guess, replicate some of that normality. With creating a schedule, I think it's so important that they also take ownership of creating that schedule. And that, you ask them, like, where do you want this schedule to be displayed? Do you want it on construction paper? Do you want it on a chalkboard, a whiteboard? Do you want it in a planner? Somewhere that's visible and they can easily see. The other thing I would say, just practically speaking, is exercise with them. I think, children, they learn more from what you model than what you tell them. So, finding ways, I know Monday, for example, it was a little bit milder, maybe trying to go for a walk, maybe turning it into sort of a nature hike, for example. For parents that are sort of socially and economically marginalized because of race, class, and gender, maybe rescheduling these things and saying, you know what, I can't now, but maybe we can do this on the weekend. The other thing I would say is, getting your children to use some of their sensories. So, find 3 things in the house that are circular, or 3 things in the house that are green, and sort of get, urging them to move around in these ways. Checking in with them, the more their schedule, and when they get breaks, And if they're not getting breaks, you can obviously speak to the teacher about brain breaks and timeouts and these things. The more flexibility you have with checking in with them and saying, hey, why don't you go, you're doing well, why don't you go and get a glass of water? The other piece would be, just videos. I know it's a little bit of a contradiction because they're always on Zoom but having videos at the same time is one of those things where it's actually serving a different function if it's a workout video. I know that Good Life and Lifetime have different workouts that you can follow. And I would also say that, if you're strapped for time and energy, try to build these exercises and this programming in with them on the weekends when you have time.
I think that that's such an interesting point, Ryan, about trying to use all different types of strategies. There's one thing I will just add to that for all the families listening is we've all tried different strategies, and sometimes they work for 3-4 days and we're excited about them, and then everyone tires of that routine and we think, oh, I tried and now it's finished. That's completely normal. If you found something that worked for 3 or 4 days, great. It's okay to try something new after that. It doesn't mean it didn't work. So keep trying new strategies, and you'll find ones that last a week and other ones that last a day and some that last for a little while longer. So as long as you keep trying with your child and collaborate, you'll find more success that way. Thanks,
Thank you
Ryan.
for adding that, Warren. Go ahead, Ryan, please.
Yeah, one other thing I was going to add is just like the importance of even stretching. Doing a morning stretch and, just going like this and doing a hold stretch and counting, turning it into a little bit of a game, like 1, and they say 2, 3, 4. So little things like that you can try to incorporate in your schedule. Sorry.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm learning so many pearls of wisdom here. And, I'm still thinking about what you initially said, David, about if it's not working, then stop. And I love that, teachers, generally speaking, we do a lot of scheduling and we're like, this is going to work. And then all of a sudden it's not working. And we need to give ourselves the flexibility and the permission to change gears. The next question I'm going to throw at you, David, and I have to tell you, this is one we negotiate in my house all the time. I think if I were to have a question, it would be about Fortnite. That's all he wants to do in the evening. But how do you manage screen time? They have to be on screens for school. For many children, that's their downtime, or even how they communicate. So how would you suggest we could think about managing that?
Okay, so first of all, I'm gonna give you 2 tools to start with in this one, and one of them is a general one. If you're not taking notes, chances are you're going to forget what we've talked about. So if you're sitting at home alone or wherever, it would probably be good to take notes of the important points. You can watch it on video, but you won't remember it because we can only hold so much in our memory at one time. So the second tool that I'm giving you in this installment is pick your battles. You have to know what's important for you. There may be some battles that you cannot afford to lose. There may be some battles that you could fight but aren't worth it. So you have to be selective about the battles you're going to pick with regard to screen time because it's very seductive. So the first thing that I think you need to do is if you think screen time is an issue, you want to have a conversation. You don't want to just say that's enough. You don't want to do something that's going to make your child resentful and fight back. You're going to want to explain why you think it's important to limit screen time. Maybe your child would even agree. Maybe they're saying, yeah, when I look at the end of the day, I'm pretty tired. I don't have much energy. I don't feel really good. I'm kind of drained. So it's part of what you want to talk about is being on a screen all day has downsides. So they're much more likely to follow rules that you ideally collaborate on setting, or if necessary, that you set, if they understand that you're not just being mean. Second of all, as Ryan was saying, it's important to sit less and move more in order to not only feel healthy, but to have energy. sometimes if your child's in a class, you can do moving while you're in the class. It will keep you energized. And by the way, kids who have attention problems have a battery that tends to wear out sooner. They just get tired sooner. And exercise is one of the key ways, especially vigorous exercise, which you can do in a minute or two to raise your heart rate, gives you more energy. So once you're starting to have the conversation, you talk about setting a screen time. And as Ryan was saying, it's really good to practice what you preach. So you can't be on the screen all the time if you want your child to be off the screen. And I wouldn't encourage you to use screens as a reward, but I'd encourage you to think about other things, right? Instead of have a conversation, talk to someone on the phone, even that's different. Do something that's fun. Have an activity that's fun. Because if you just take something away and the child is bored, it's hard to last. I mean, they break you down because they'll just say, I'm bored, I'm bored, I'm bored. And eventually you'll say, oh, okay, watch it. So have something good as an alternative. Be a good role model. You may need to have something to monitor the screen time. Say, you've reached your limit, here it is. And it's kind of good if you have some active parent controls that can do that for you, because that way you're not turning it off. I couldn't help it, it's over. The screen time log says we're finished. I wish there was something we could do about it. Then it's not you being the meaning, it's time's up. So these are just a few ideas. There are so many. You may want to ask for your child's passwords if you want to limit their connection on Facebook and, well, not Facebook, forgive me, whatever social media they're using. And again, have a screen-free bedroom if you can do it, because it's so tempting. I'll turn it over to you, Ryan.
Yeah, I think those are great points. And the interesting thing is that how like screen usage kind of affects sleep, and how sleep can kind of affect the focus, and how all of these things are related. And I guess the only thing I can add in terms of the screen usage is if the more you know their schedule and the more these things are kind of timed, and using something like a timer, for example, that times out, similar to what David was alluding to. I would say transition warnings, if it's possible, would be helpful. Letting them know, look, you have 15 minutes left. Kind of use it wisely and enjoy.
Thank you so much, Ryan. I know I can turn the kids' Wi-Fi on or off from my phone, and it was a real game changer in my house because they had a timer, and when it was over, it was over. But thank you for those amazing solutions. And I'm continuing to think about something you said earlier, Ryan, about the consistency and the schedule and how that fosters some calm with young people. The next question we have is for you, Ryan. And this was, again, all of these questions have come from the parents, but this one was very frequent as well, which is the feeling that their child is isolated. They haven't seen friends, they haven't seen family, and they don't seem happy. They're not the kid that they're used to. And what would you suggest for parents?
It's a great question. And it's very real right now. I think the feeling, the disconnection, the isolation, the loneliness, I think these are all things, again, the most important thing is to validate these feelings. And again, it starts with a conversation through the check-ins, asking them, when they wake up, like, how are you feeling? How did you sleep? Did you have any dreams? Also encouraging them to use positive affirmations, especially for the children that, face like suicide ideation, and different things, like anxiety, depression, and different things, getting them to repeat to themselves, I'm able, I can, I have the strengths within me, I can control my emotions, I can do these things. And the other thing I would say is just the reframing. I can't tell you how many children, how many youth I work with, and they just, they say, Zoom, it sucks. Like this virtual stuff, it just sucks. or they say, I'm not good at science. And so asking certain questions like, what part of it is it that you don't feel comfortable with? And, what have you tried? How can I sort of help you? And so kind of trying to challenge some of those negative thoughts and reframing them, and sort of, challenging the validity of those thoughts, because oftentimes those thoughts are not true. And the other thing I would say is there's an education piece here too, around stressors. What are your child's stressors? And what are different ways that they can find calm? And you can, develop certain strategies. And I'll share two quick ones here. I think that in terms of mindfulness, that's a big word, but all it comes down to is, for example, just taking deep breaths, and paying attention to your breathing, paying attention to it flowing through your body. Getting children to reflect on how stress feels on their body. Do you feel the tightness in your chest? Does it make your hands sort of cringe? And so simple breathing techniques like holding your breath, and using an example of, the like smelling a flower, right? Where you breathe in through your nose, maybe you do it for 3 seconds, you hold for 3 seconds, and then you blow out the hot chocolate for another 3 seconds, right? And so these visuals can also help them practice breathing and controlled breathing, which is a good way to get their stress out of their body. The other thing, because of the Zoom fatigue and being just online a lot, what I find is just even like getting your sensories involved again, like, your hands, your feelings. And so, rubbing your hands together for say 30 seconds, right? And you can do this with children, and just like sort of cupping them over your eyes, asking them to close their eyes and just sort of cupping it over their eyes. It could provide some darkness, and some good darkness, and some relaxation for them. And so I think those are some things that are helpful. And I'll pass it off to David.
I'd like to add one more thing, because I'm talking about giving you tools. Here's one where I don't want to give you a tool. I want you to focus on a different thing, because we are rushed and we want to solve the problem. And sometimes that's not the right tool. Sometimes it's important, a lot of times, especially if you're feeling your child is angry or sad or just lacking energy, it's to talk about it, not to move away from the feeling, but to talk about it. I see you seem low. Can we talk about that? Or this is what I've noticed, and this is what it is. I'd love to talk and learn more about it. And if I would give you a tool in doing this, part of it is to try to really understand, to validate. Yeah, I can understand why you feel this way. And I use, if you're going to take a tool, the 3 because technique, which is to say, I can understand why you're feeling unmotivated. You don't have your friends. You don't get to see your teachers. You're locked inside this room all day long. I feel the same way. I get it. I totally get it. It does, it's not trying to minimize it. It's trying to say, boy, there it is sitting between us. And, just connecting on that, not trying to change it, not trying to fix it, just staying with there, being empathetic goes a long way, because more than anything else, we want to feel connected. And we don't feel connected when we're through a screen. We don't feel connected when people don't understand us. So really spend time to understand. And I guess what I always say at the end is it something like that? Because I'm a psychologist, I'm an expert, right? Well, now you know differently. I never know what you're thinking. I never know. So I may approximate it, but if I just say, is it something like this? It gives you a chance to fill it in. And if I'm wrong, It gives you a chance to correct me, which is even more important, because if I'm on a different track than you, it ain't going to go anywhere.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to jump in. First of all, the comments and conversation have been wonderful and insightful, and I have to be completely transparent. You know, I'm here as you know, obviously as a principal in this, but I'm very much a parent, and so much of this, I'm thinking about, you know, my two young ones that are somewhere in the house right now, probably on screens. So a lot of this is very real right now. But I was very kind of clicked to something that Ryan said about the notion of reframing. I think reframing has been a really interesting thought process in this time where we have been might feel closed down a little bit. Our world is smaller. We've been told to, you know, stay at home. We're not going out of our bubble as much. But I think one of the things that has been really interesting is it's given us time sometimes to reflect and to connect. And by reframing things that we walk past every day, right, that are just, you know, static sometimes, is really, really interesting. You know, noticing whether it's, you know, a piece of art on the street, noticing, you know, a garden, a plant, a cool car, whatever it is. I think it's really interesting to frame that moment, because what, you know, I feel so grounding in that is it brings all the parties that are there together, right, in that moment. There isn't a speculation of tomorrow and what was. It's right here. We're looking at this really cool, you know, daffodil, right? Like whatever that kind of piece is. And I love that notion of reframing. It isn't changing, but it's like stepping to the left, or even looking just in a different way. You know, so that really struck with me, and I just wanted to add on to that. So thank you. And again, this has been phenomenal. I'm going to continue taking my parental notes.
I've got my notes going too, Dane. I've got all these stickies everywhere. So thank you. Thank you for adding that how important it is for us to reframe, to live in the moment. And I heard both you, Ryan, and David talk about the validation piece. Sometimes we don't understand that a 9-year-old can have a form of anxiety. We sometimes think it's exclusive to adults, and it isn't. It just comes in a different form sometime. So another question that we had repeatedly, David, I'm going to ask you, which is about parents who are struggling to motivate their children to try their best in school every day. It just seems that the children are distracted and they don't know how to get them moving when it comes to school. Do you have any advice for that?
I do. So I'm going to give you an acronym. An acronym means I'm going to give you a word. The word is, you want your child to stay afloat. And float stands for that everybody focuses differently, learns differently, organizes differently, advocates differently, and takes part in classes differently. They float. I want you to picture a little kid floating on a tube going down a gentle river. So it's important to keep in mind how your child learns. So do you need to help them get motivated? Well, we talked about, and I'm just going to bring it back. You get tired and bored sitting and watching, especially if you're listening and just listening. So you need to do things. If you do some vigorous exercise, increases your heart rate, it re-energizes you. It brings you some energy, because you can't be motivated all the time unless you take those breaks. You want to have a workspace and a work-play balance, right? Now, sometimes you also need to minimize distractions. So make sure if they're doing one thing, they're doing one thing, not two or three. And if a child is struggling to comply, if they can't do it themselves, and we wouldn't be really talking about it if they were, then you might try a first then approach, which is, okay, do this first, and then you can fill in the blank. And especially if it's doing the hard thing first, it gives them a motivation. You may even give them a timer. Do it for 5 minutes. 5 minutes is too much. Do it for 2 minutes. Because getting started is half the battle. So if you just get them started, then it's not so bad. And sometimes you may need to give them some structure or some ideas to help them along. So you also want to explore their reasons for weak motivation and engagement. Is it hard? Are they not understanding something? It's important to identify if that's a problem so you can deal with it. And then you want to communicate with the teacher. The teacher may not all be getting the kind of feedback that you're getting. So you can think about ways to solve the problem. Even another thing that's very motivating is social connection. So you want to build that in as well. It's very isolating being here like this. In fact, normally if we were talking, I would want to hear from you, Alison, and you, whoever's in the audience, about what you're dealing with, what works for you, because everybody's got knowledge and your kids have knowledge. And I would talk to other people as well to see what works for them. But building connection helps. All these things are motivating, have fun things to do to motivate them. All these things help with the focus and engagement. And really make sure you take breaks. It's hard to do this day in, day out, hour after hour.
Thank you, David. It sure is. Can be incredibly difficult. I know for so many of us, we're working from home at the same time as our children are trying to learn from home. We're sharing devices. We're sharing the Wi-Fi comes in and out. It's an endless struggle to do our jobs at the same time, do our most important job, which is be parents. Ryan, what advice can you give us as the audience for how we can support our children at the same time as take care of our jobs while we're all in the same workspace?
Yeah, thank you for the question, and great points from David. Just wanted to quickly add around nutrition, the importance of having really a healthy diet when it comes to focus and motivation, balancing out like the carbs, the fibers, the proteins, the portions throughout the day. And then the other piece around sleep being very important with focus. So, taking some time maybe to dim the lights, maybe playing, some soft music, some ancestral music, maybe drinking, again, it's not a, one size fits all formula, but maybe some hot tea, right? Not too close to bed so that, they don't have to go to pee or go to the washroom, but just some ideas around that. Now, that's a very real challenge that Lauren, that you in the question, in terms of finding, being able to support your child in sort of their independent learning. And one of the things I would say with that is just self-disclosure, I think, is a big thing. To communicate to your child that, maybe, that you also have things to do. And that, it would be helpful and supportive if they are able to kind of be self-sufficient in many ways. And with that, I would say to find a space in where you live, that they can name. Maybe it's a creative space, and a space, and also making sure that that the time that they're working, they know what they're supposed to be doing, where they're supposed to be doing it, when they're supposed to be doing it, and they're a part of creating that within the schedule. And I think that's so important. And the other thing that I guess one of the last pieces I would share on that note would be taking the time to, when you're able to, whether it be on the weekend, during your downtimes, to build capacity in your children. So if they can, make their own breakfast, put together like a peanut butter sandwich or cereal, some fruits, or if they're a little bit older and they can scramble an egg. I think these are all things that will alleviate some of the time that you have. I also think it's important for them to have sort of self-evaluation, for them to have conversations with them, after maybe a homework session or a work session, and say, sort of how did that session go? You know, how did you feel about that session? You know, what were some of the positives of that sessions? What were sort of some of the difficult stuff about that session? Yeah, and if anything else comes to mind, I'll share it. But those are some pieces I was thinking.
If I could add one thing, I don't even know if I've said it right. You've got so many good ideas. I'm so glad to be sitting here and hearing from you. One thing that, if I didn't mention it before, I want to mention it now. It's the tool would be called putting on your oxygen mask first. For those of you who've been on planes, you know, at the beginning they say, if the cabin pressure drops, here's an oxygen mask that will drop from the ceiling. Put it on. If you have a child, put yours on first. Part of what I'm talking about here is that this is stressful for us as parents as well. And you need to take care of yourself. You need to be, I can say you need to be, it's really hard, but I encourage you to be compassionate towards yourself, to the mistakes you make. I don't mind making mistakes. As my staff know, I make mistakes all the time. But what I really think is important is to be able to go back and say, I need to repair that. Something didn't work out. Let's figure out what went wrong. I made a mistake. It's okay. I got angry. I became impatient. It's okay to feel that way, as long as you go back and say, I didn't feel good about the way that ended, and you do some work to repair it. So you be compassionate towards yourself. You take breaks yourself. You take care of yourself. You do the things, the nutrition, the exercise, the sleep as best as you can, and forgive yourself when you don't do so well. And then you give the oxygen mask to your child, which is you give that same love, which sometimes is easier to give to our children than it is to ourselves, to them. Be compassionate and caring and say, boy, we're in this boat together. I wish it was over, but we're together. We'll make it through it. Let's do what we can to do that.
Thank
And
you
David,
so much. Please,
sorry,
go ahead,
Alison.
Ryan.
David actually just reminded me of something as well. Just in terms of carving out that independent sort of learning space, and especially again for those socially and kind of economically disenfranchised families. You know, especially if there are siblings, and it's hard to find a private space, a private workspace. You know, I urge maybe the dollar store. They have like certain dividers. And if that's, if that doesn't work, then maybe at the grocery store, even getting cardboard boxes to kind of separate into cubicles, where they can have their visuals, and they can have sort of their reminders in that space, and they can sort of carve it out and tailor it towards them. And if there are sort of, technology, because there is a technology gap, particularly in Black and racialized communities, I think it's so important to, communicate that with your teacher and the school and some community organizations. And I know an email will go out about some supports available in that regard, in terms of getting headphones, in terms of getting a laptop or a printer and those sort of things. Just wanted to add that.
Thank you so much for adding that, Ryan, because as I've been taking notes and thinking about, how do I make this work for my own kids? I thought about my own economic privilege as an educator. My kids do have their own rooms, they have their own headphones, and they have their own computers, and that's not everyone's situation. And it's really, really important what Ryan just said. As parents and families within the Toronto District School Board, there's access for your child to have what they need to be successful. And you need to ask the question. You need to say to the teacher, exactly as Ryan indicated, my child needs headphones. How can you support this? And it's okay to ask that question, because we're not in the same spaces. All homes don't look the same, and we recognize that, but we need to do, it's our obligation as a board and a system to do what it's needed for all students to succeed. So please, if you find that, if I just had these two things, that would make working at home a lot easier, then please ask the question. David, we had a question that a lot of people ask, and it was around, when should I actually worry about my child? Like, when do I think, okay, this is outside of parenting, I need to get some help? What would you say to our parents that are wondering about that question?
It's a really good question because I think a lot of us are feeling some struggle at this time. So some of it is, in my circles, you think about frequency, intensity, and duration. So is this going on a lot? How intense is it? We all get upset, but am I really losing it? Am I down? Am I unable to get out of bed? Am I completely unable to pay attention? Is my mind going all over the place? How intense is it? And how long is it? Duration is how long is this lasting? So the longer it lasts, the more worried I would be. So if you ask yourself the question, do you feel this way almost every day? Do you feel overwhelmed and very upset? Or on the other side, are you just lacking in energy? Does it stop you from doing fun and important things? Is it affecting my sleeping and eating? Is it affecting my relationships with others? When you start saying the intensity of these is great, then you start to think about it's time to get help. And there's lots of help that's available for you. And I know they're going to be giving there's a handout that will be coming. But one of the first things you can do is talk to the teacher or talk to the principal. There are social workers and psychologists, there are child and youth workers. There are we're pretty lucky in Toronto to have a lot of services available, and they can help guide you and they can provide support as well. So again, it's frequency, how often is it happening? The intensity, how intense is it? And the duration, is this going on? And finally, if I'm really uncomfortable and I'm worried, don't wait. You can ask. Ryan mentioned, if your child is feeling suicidal, you can say, you know what, are you really looking down? Are you thinking of hurting yourself? And you won't make someone hurt themselves by asking the question. In fact, if they're feeling that low, they'll tell you, and then you can take action. And I think they're going to give the links for the kids' help phone. So I'll just leave it at that, and I'm sure Ryan's got some things to add to.
I think those points, I think you hit the nail on the head, David, as per usual. I think that's huge. The duration, the intensity, the frequency. Is there a change in the normal typical behavior, especially, differently from before the pandemic? Now, obviously, with the caveat that there are going to be changes because of the pandemic. But like as David said, just looking at the impact, how is it impacting them? How is it impacting the relationships, as you mentioned, David? And how is it impacting their schooling? And sort of asking those questions and probing, I would say, based on that, would be a good time to ask for help and seek help and not be shy to ask for help, because I think sometimes, particularly in certain communities, we try to be over resilient with some of these things.
I just thank you both. I just kind of had a follow-up question. It got me thinking, and maybe again, I'm going to to my experience a bit. How important is it to make sure that we as parents take stock of ourselves, right? So that there sometimes isn't that transference of putting our stress and anxiety or our perceived belief in what we think our kids might be experiencing, but some of that is in what our experience is, right? That we're taking our stresses and sometimes projecting it, or because this is a conversation a lot, we sometimes look for things. I just wanted to kind of ask that piece about the importance of us taking a personal inventory. Thanks.
I love the question. So I'm going to come back to the gap. I hope you all remember what the gap was. This is a test. It's a school thing. The gap is the gap between the demands of the situation and your ability to meet those demands. So what you've got is an unsolved problem. And so, Dane, to speak to your question, how do I know how much is me and how much is my child? That's a hard one to figure out on your own. But if you start to say, there's an unsolved problem, let's put our heads together on this. And then it's hard to do, but try to be open and say, what does your child think is the unsolved problem? The child will probably let you know, or hopefully will let you know that you may be part of the problem. You're putting a lot of pressure on me. You're down. You seem worried all the time. You don't have any time to spend with me. The child may help fill in the gap because the gap may not be all on one side. The gap is between the situation and the child. And there are a lot of things that could fill in the gap. So I like to explore. What's the gap? How do you understand it? And there's words that you can use that help. When they say something and you need more information, say, how so? Or, I don't quite understand. These are liberating words. They help extend the conversation. Or, I'm confused. I don't understand this. And it's hard to stay even with it, and that you're, because you might react to what they're saying. No, it's not my fault. But that's where you have the repair. You're gonna screw up. I'm a psychologist. I can tell you, I'm an expert in screwing up. So take the time to make the repairs. But that's part of the ongoing conversation that we have with our family, with our friends, and with our children.
Thank you so much, David. I'm going to use how so. Can we use them on our partners as well?
Absolutely.
Okay, awesome.
But they'll start to notice them.
This has been a brilliant hour. We're coming to a close, and we have one final question for each of you. And it's within your area of expertise. So Ryan, the question for you is, how do we access social services and supports in the community? And David, with you, it's with respect to the school board. How do we get mental health resources within the school board? So Ryan, feel free to go first. And
Sure.
then we'll follow up with you, David.
I did send over a list of them. I think they're going to be out to the parents at some point, maybe tomorrow. But just to reiterate some of those points, I would say just trying to find a children's mental health center in your community. I represent Taibu Community Health Center and Rexdale Community Health Center. Those are two examples where you can get information about COVID-19. You can get psychosocial support. There's case management. There's income support, transportation support, and different things like that. Generally, I would say, connecting with, community workers or, trusted individuals within the school can be a support. And also, I noticed that just on the TDSB website, if you just type in like mental health and well-being, they have a list of resources that are available to you that I think can be helpful. And the other thing I always recommend to parents is just doing a Google search. Google is honestly my best friend. And so, just putting in like Canada 211, and there you're able to, and again, these will be in the resources that are sent out, but there you're able to tailor it to your postal code, and specifically what type of services you're looking for. And then it will pull up a lot of sort of community supports that way.
Thank you. Over to you, David.
Okay, so in the schools, there are supports. So as I say, you can reach out to your teacher, reach out to the principal. You can ask to have your child discuss at what's called a school support team meeting. And we teachers use acronyms, SSTs, where there will be a psychologist and a social worker and others who will work with you. We work for you. That's the news. When you come to these meetings and see all these eyes staring at you, they're staring at you so we can learn more about what's going on so we can best help. And you're an important part of that because no one knows your child better than you. So if we're going to be successful, we absolutely have to work together. And if you don't feel comfortable with that, say so. because we need to make sure that you feel okay about the team that's working with you. So I would say use some of these resources. We really are there working for you.
That is amazing. It's been really appreciated tonight, both Ryan and David, for sharing strategies for all of us. And all of us are in our unique space, dealing with unique challenges. And what I think I heard tonight was that we should just access resources, try our best to work with our children, take responsibility for what we can control with our families, and seek advice from others. So thank you so much for being a part of this and for helping our community. We had over 150 parents and community members on this evening. I'm going to quickly let everyone know what you can anticipate as next steps. Tomorrow, you'll receive an email as long as you register. You'll receive an email with the recording, as well as links to resources that both David and Ryan have helped us gather. In addition to that, we're asking that you fill in a short survey. And what the survey will do is allow us to begin planning for our next community evening. Our goal is to be able to provide you with as much insight during these difficult times as possible. So look out for that email tomorrow. And we thank you so much. Over to you.
I just wanted to say, as we're closing up here, I really wanted to say a huge thank you, and it's thank you to many people. First of all, I'm gonna start. I have a direction that I would like to go with my thank yous. So big thank you to Alison for guiding the conversation tonight. It takes real skill to do that so that there is a flow, and it is even more tremendously so when we're not able to share space together. There's something about sharing an aura and oxygen and that helps, but thank you for that. Thank you very much to Ryan and David for your contributions, your willingness to be open with us, to share your knowledge, be the knowledge holders tonight, as Alison talked about in the beginning. So thank you very, very much. A huge thank you to Lauren. Lauren has done a tremendous amount of work to get this set up, to make sure that the flow that I talked about was going so well. He has done a tremendous amount to make sure that you are all able to be part of this and we're able to go forward. And my final thank you is to those of you that joined us tonight. It is phenomenal that we had this many people that wanted to be in community and be together to share knowledge. It is unfortunate that we can't have a bit of a two-way, but I feel that we've tried to at least bring some voices together tonight through your questions, and that the conversation is far from over, that you have the opportunity to reach out, but it speaks volumes to your commitment to your children to take time tonight to be here. This also goes to those of you who are unfortunately not able to be here live, but are tuning in to the recorded piece. Thank you very, very much. So from all of us to you, thank you very much for being here tonight.
Night, everyone.